Awoken by a Lamp. One of my favorite glitch stories is this one. It originally appeared as a comment on Reddit and has become legendary among glitch enthusiasts. To give it the recognition it deserves, I have decided to include it in this video. During my last semester at college, I had a life-altering experience, one that I still struggle to fully comprehend. It began when I was assaulted by a football player for the crime of walking where he wanted to drive. I didn't stand a chance. The force of the blow knocked me unconscious, and while I lay there on the ground, something extraordinary happened. I lived an entirely different life. In this life, I met a woman who instantly stole my heart. She was kind, beautiful, and everything I could have dreamed of. I pursued her relentlessly, weathering heartbreak and dispatching a few unworthy boyfriends before finally winning her over. 2 years later, we were married. Not long after, we had our first child, a daughter. Life felt perfect. I had a great job, and my wife was able to stay home with our daughter, devoting her time to raising her. A couple of years later, she gave birth to our son. He was the light of my life. Every morning before work, I'd go into his room just to see him and dote on him, along with my daughter. Years passed. We built a beautiful life together, filled with love, family, and happiness. Then, one evening, I noticed something strange. While sitting on the couch, my eyes were drawn to a lamp. It was a square lamp with a red base, gold trim, and a white square shade. Something about it felt off. The perspective was wrong. It looked 3D, but inverted, like it was bending reality in a way I couldn't fully understand. I couldn't stop staring at it. That night, I stayed awake, fixated on the lamp. The next morning, I didn't go to work. Something was deeply unsettling about it, as though it didn't belong in the world I was living in. I stopped eating. I only left the couch to use the bathroom, but even that stopped eventually. For 3 days, I sat there, staring at the lamp. My wife grew increasingly worried and finally left, taking our kids to her mother's house while she tried to figure out what to do. And then it hit me. The lamp wasn't real. The house wasn't real. My wife, my children, the last 10 years of my life, they weren't real. As the realization struck, the lamp began to grow. Its dimensions twisted, expanding wider and deeper, filling my entire perspective. Everything around me dissolved into red. I heard voices, screams, and a cacophony of unearthly sounds. Then I felt pain. An unbearable, excruciating amount of pain. The first words out of my mouth as I opened my eyes were, "I'm missing teeth." I was lying on my back on the sidewalk, surrounded by strangers. Some were panicking, others staring in shock. I had no idea what was happening. A police officer scooped me up and half-dragged, half-carried me across the sidewalk and onto the grass, where he threw me face down into the back of a police car. I was too dazed to process what was going on. Eventually, I was taken to the hospital. They ran CT scans and other tests to assess the damage from the assault. What followed were 3 years of crushing depression. I grieved the loss of my wife and children, the family I had loved so deeply, the life I had built with them. But what haunted me most was the knowledge that they had never truly existed. I feared I was losing my mind. I cried myself to sleep every night, hoping for a dream where I could see my wife again. But she never appeared. Sometimes, I catch glimpses of my son, though, just out of the corner of my eye. He's always 5 years old, frozen in time, and I can never hear what he's trying to say. I experienced something I genuinely can't explain. Every morning on my way to work, I stop at a convenience store to grab a can of energy juice for the drive. My commute is fairly long, and I usually finish the drink en route. Yesterday, I decided to try a new brand. It came in a distinctive bright pink can. I took a sip while driving, didn't like it, and put it back in the cup holder, nearly full, where it stayed for the rest of the drive. This morning I followed my usual routine. I stopped at the store, went inside, and picked up my usual choice, a classic Red Bull for the drive. When I got back to my car, I saw yesterday's bright pink can still sitting in the cup holder, almost full. I picked it up, walked over to the trash bin outside the store, and threw it away. But when I walked back to my car and opened the door, I froze. The same bright pink can was back in the cup holder, right where it had been before. I stood there for a minute, trying to process what I was seeing. Then, I picked up the can again, still nearly full, and walked back to the trash bin, determined to figure out what was going on. When I looked inside the bin, the first can I had thrown away was still there, lying on its side with a bit of juice spilled out, but otherwise intact. The bin wasn't particularly full, and I couldn't see any other cans that resembled it. So there I was, standing with two identical bright pink cans of energy juice, one in each hand, completely baffled. At that point, I gave up trying to make sense of it. I called my wife to tell her what happened, but she just laughed, assuming I was messing around. It's such a small and seemingly insignificant event compared to some of the wild stories I've read on Reddit, but I can't think of a logical explanation. My boyfriend and I glitched. My boyfriend and I were coming back from a trip to visit my family. We live in a small second-floor apartment overlooking a parking lot, and we had a lot of stuff to unpack from the car, especially food my family had sent with us. We were taking it upstairs bit by bit, and one trip included a load of food that needed to go straight into the fridge. As I was unloading the food into the fridge, my boyfriend was standing at the counter, and we were having a full conversation. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but it was definitely something that wouldn't make sense for him to just walk away from. I turned around for a split second to put something in the fridge, and when I turned back, he was gone. At first, I thought he was playing a joke on me. I laughed and started looking around the apartment, expecting him to pop out from somewhere. But after a few minutes, it stopped being funny because he was nowhere to be found. Sometimes, he steps out onto the patio to smoke, so I opened the door to check. He wasn't there, but then I looked down into the parking lot and saw him unloading the car. I was completely baffled. How had he gotten downstairs so quickly? Why would he leave in the middle of our conversation without saying anything? A few minutes later, he came back up, but he had to knock because the front door was locked. Apparently, he didn't have his keys with him. That made everything even stranger. How had the door locked itself when I was in the kitchen the entire time? Our front door is in the same room where I was unloading the food. If he'd left, I would have heard or seen him open and close the door, but I didn't. When I asked him about it, he had no idea what I was talking about. He didn't remember our conversation while I was unloading food, or even standing at the counter at all. I still can't make sense of it. It's like he vanished for a moment and reappeared downstairs. None of it adds up. Another dimension. I went to bed, as I always do, a near-perfectly happy man. I have a great wife, 2 wonderful kids, and a fulfilling, albeit not flawless, life. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't have imagined the journey I was about to take. In what I can only describe as a dream, my wife, kids, and I were at a gathering. My ex-girlfriend from years ago, someone I dated from 17 to 21 and hadn't been close with in over a decade, was there with her husband. At one point, she approached me, insisting I follow her into a back room and step into a closet. When I did, everything shifted. It was like stepping into a movie of my own life, but this time with a twist. I was 21 again, standing in her parents' driveway, reliving the conversation we had when we broke up because she was leaving for college. Only this time, I made a different choice. I agreed to move with her. From that moment, it was as if I was fully immersed in an alternate reality. I stepped into my younger self and lived an entirely different life. She graduated college while I worked, then I went to school while she supported me. We got married, had a son, then a daughter. We bought a beautiful home, took vacations, and built a life that felt both real and completely foreign. It wasn't just a dream. I could see, hear, and feel everything as though I was truly there. I had memories of friends I'd never met in my real life, of moments that never happened in this timeline. Occasionally, I'd ask about my other life, the one with my current wife and kids. She'd dismiss it, saying I needed to let it go. Over time, it became harder to remember my real life, and this new existence felt more and more like my only reality. Years passed. I lived this life as if it were mine, until one day I decided to confront my memories. I sought out doctors, convinced I was losing my mind. They told me I was schizophrenic, that the other life was a delusion. Slowly, I began to believe them. Eventually, I let go of my old life. I found peace with my wife and children in this new reality, retiring with the woman I thought I'd spend my final days with. But then, she told me something that shook me to my core. She, too, remembered stepping into that closet at the gathering. She lived a life where we stayed together, only returning to the present after I died at 93. She had come back for me. Now I was faced with a choice. I could step back into the closet and return to my original life, or stay with her in the one we had built. I chose to go back. When I stepped out of the closet, it was as if no time had passed. My original wife was there, and we went home as if nothing had happened. I didn't tell her about what I'd experienced, but this morning, driving to work, everything felt surreal. It was like I'd lived 2 lifetimes, 2 entirely different paths, and now I was back in the original one. I feel wiser, more mature, as if the years I lived in that other reality somehow stayed with me. I'm grateful for my wife and the life we share, but a part of me wonders about the other world, about the people I knew, the life I built, the memories I made. Did I choose this life? I think I did. But I can't shake the feeling that I've truly lived twice. I've been waiting to share this story because it's hands down the strangest thing that's ever happened to me. My dad and I enjoy geocaching. For those who don't know, geocaching involves hunting for small, hidden containers in public areas. These caches typically have a logbook and sometimes small trinkets inside. Geocachers upload GPS coordinates and details about the cache to a website, and others search for them, sign the logbook, and maybe trade trinkets. There's even an app now with added features like photos, notes, and hints. One day we set out to find a specific cache. We searched high and low, but couldn't find it. It was frustrating, but not unusual. A week or 2 later, we tried again. No luck. This time, we noticed it had been logged as found fairly recently, so we didn't assume it had gone missing, which does happen sometimes. Still, we left empty-handed and moved on to find a couple of other caches. A few weeks after that, we decided to give it one last shot. I checked the app and saw that it had been found since our last attempt. Using a hint from the most recent finder, we searched thoroughly and finally located it. Victory! I pulled out my pen to sign the logbook, but as I unrolled it, my heart nearly stopped. At the very end of the log were our names, in my handwriting. I called my dad over and we stared at it together, completely confused and freaked out. I double-checked the app and realized that the most recent log entry was from our own account. Even the hint we'd used to find the cache was one we had left. To this day, we still talk about it. It's one of those bizarre experiences where I almost assume people won't believe me because it's so strange, like a literal merging of timelines. Thankfully, my dad was there to witness it too, so I know he 100% believes me. After some digging, we figured out that our first find had been logged on the same date as one of our earlier unsuccessful attempts. But the thing is, we absolutely did not find it that day. We would have remembered. It was driving us nuts, trying to figure out where it was. Honestly, I don't know why we didn't just write it off as a missing cache in the first place. Something about it kept nagging at us, compelling us to go back. Looking back, I'm also puzzled as to how I didn't notice that the recent log entry was under our own username until after we found the cache. It was such a strange experience, but it makes for an amazing story. something weird. As I lay in bed at night, the room was dark, save for the faint glow of my phone illuminating my face. Quietly scrolling, I was lost in my usual late-night ritual, the world around me silent and still. Splash. A sudden deluge of water, what felt like 300 millisil, hit my face and chest. "What the fuck?" I hissed under my breath, startled but mindful not to wake anyone. My heart raced as I instinctively scanned the room, convinced for a moment I was under attack. Grabbing my phone, I flicked on the flashlight. Nothing. The room was empty. No lurking figure, no dripping object overhead. Just me, my soaked bed sheets, and the eerie stillness of the night. I wiped my face, the shock subsiding into bewilderment. If someone had been there, I'd have heard them. Anyone familiar with the acoustics of their bedroom knows its every creak and whisper. I heard absolutely nothing. To this day, I have no explanation. Was it a glitch in reality? Perhaps. And if it was, then it's currently leading 1-0 in this bizarre water fight. All I could think was, why water? Why not gold? But credit where it's due, thank you, Matrix, for not choosing acid. I just experienced a glitch I can't explain. Like most afternoons, I was working from home, seated on my usual spot on the couch. To my left, a trusty side table held my supplies and chargers. To my right, sat an organizer bin. This setup is my default. Everything is in its place. A few minutes ago, I went to pick up my phone, but I foolishly grabbed it by the charger instead. Naturally, it snagged on the couch, slipped from my grasp, and fell between the cushion and armrest. The sound it made was loud enough that I was convinced it had fallen through the couch and hit the floor underneath. I got on my hands and knees to check, but it wasn't there. That's when I realized it was lodged inside the couch. After moving the organizer bin, pillow, and cushion, I spotted a small hole in the couch lining where the phone must have perfectly fallen through. I tried reaching in, but my arm wouldn't fit. With no other choice, I reluctantly tore the lining to retrieve my phone. I cringed at the crumbs stuck to it, wiped it clean, and plugged it back into the charger on my side table. Relieved that the ordeal was over, I put the cushion and pillow back in place. For good measure, I placed a pillow near the side table to block the hole and prevent anything else from falling in. As I sat down, I made a mental note to figure out how to repair the torn lining. But then, when I reached for my phone on the side table, it wasn't there. Confused, I stood up and patted my pockets, even though I knew I hadn't put it there. I looked under the couch, in the organizer bin, everywhere. Finally, I used my smartwatch to ping the phone. The sound was unmistakable. It was back inside the couch. Disbelief set in as I removed the pillow and cushion again. I went to stick my hand into the hole, but this time, it wasn't large enough. I had to tear the lining again to get to the phone. Here's why I know this was a glitch and not some bizarre coincidence. I'm home alone. No one else could have moved the phone. And even if I weren't alone, I hadn't left the room at any point during this. The sound. I heard the phone fall the first time. It was loud and obvious. If it had fallen again, I would have heard it. But the room was silent, save for my dog softly snoring. The charger. After retrieving the phone the first time, I plugged it back in. Even if it somehow fell back into the couch, the charger would have been displaced, but it wasn't. The charger lay exactly as I had left it, unattached to the phone. The lining. I distinctly remember tearing it to retrieve the phone the first time. When I found the phone inside the couch again, the lining was intact, as though it had never been ripped. I had to tear it all over again. It was as if the universe reset itself by 2 minutes, undoing the entire sequence and putting my phone right back where it started. I've always been skeptical about glitches in the Matrix, but now, I can't explain this away. It finally happened to me. I experienced a glitch. My brother's friend that nobody remembers I want to preface this by saying that I wasn't a child when this happened. I was old enough to remember everything clearly. When my younger brother was in elementary school, he had a friend named Jackson. Jackson was a cute little boy with brunette hair, and my brother talked about him all the time. Every day after school, my brother would come home and excitedly tell us about how he spent recess with Jackson and another boy we'll call Leroy. The three of them were inseparable. I distinctly remember my parents commenting on how Jackson was such a cute name. In fact, when we were considering places to move, we briefly thought about Jackson, Mississippi, and the name of the town even reminded us of my brother's friend. It became a small, recurring topic of conversation in our family. Fast forward to last year. I brought up Jackson in a conversation, and to my shock, nobody remembered him. Not my mom, not my dad, not even my brother. They all insisted that my brother never had a friend named Jackson. But I explained the connections, how my brother would talk about his friend Jackson and Leroy every day, how my mom liked the name, and how it even came up when we were considering a move to Jackson, Mississippi. Still, no one could recall him. The weirdest part? Everyone remembers Leroy, but Jackson seems to have vanished from their memories completely. To this day, it drives me crazy because I know Jackson was real. I vividly remember my brother talking about him, the name, and everything connected to him.